Captain Lee Wan was drinking his morning coffee when the universe changed forever. The Iron Fang had been patrolling the dead zones for 3 months now, watching empty space where nothing ever happened. Lee preferred it that way. On the rim, nobody bothered the humans, and the humans didn't bother anybody else. Captain, incoming priority transmission, called out Communications Officer Bei Min-jun from his station. It's from the Galactic Council, sir. Lee nearly choked on his coffee. In his 15 years commanding the Iron Fang, the Council had never once contacted a human ship directly. They usually pretended humans didn't exist. Put it through, Lee said, straightening his uniform. The bridge went dark as a massive holographic projection filled the center of the room. Ambassador Yiltara materialized before them, her usual pristine appearance now disheveled. The tall, blue-skinned diplomat's forearms trembled as she spoke, and her large black eyes were wide with terror. Captain Lee Wan of the human vessel. Iron Fang, she began, her melodic voice cracking. I am Ambassador Yiltara of the Galactic Council. We have never asked this of your kind before. Commander Park Sujin, Lee's second in command, moved closer. She'd served with Lee for 8 years and had never seen an alien look this scared. Park whispered, Sir, look at her hands. She's shaking, Ambassador continued, tears now flowing down her alien features. 18 hours ago, the Void Devourers awakened from their ancient sleep, Zephyrian home system. 17 billion souls, gone in less than 4 hours. Captain, they didn't just destroy the planets. They consumed them. The entire system now exists as empty space, as if it never was. Lieutenant Kim Tae-ho at the weapons station pulled up long-range sensors. His face went pale as he studied the readings. Captain, I'm picking up massive energy signatures. They're moving fast, heading straight for the populated sectors. Whatever these things are, they're each the size of a small moon. Lee felt his blood run cold. The Zephyrians were one of the most advanced species in the galaxy. Their shields could stop supernovas, their weapons could crack planets. Something had wiped them out in 4 hours. Captain Lee, the ambassador's voice brought him back to the present. Your Deathworld species are our only hope. The Council has sent our finest fleets. The Altarian Star Navy, the Centauri Defense Force, the elite guard of the inner worlds. They lasted minutes. The holographic display shifted, showing battle footage that made Lee's stomach turn. Dark shapes moved through space like living shadows. When they touched Council ships, the vessels simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not vaporized, they just stopped being real. The Council formally requests the intervention of the Deathworld Alliance, Yiltara continued. We will provide any resources you require. Our shipyards, our weapons, our technology, everything is at your disposal. The bridge fell silent. Lee looked around at his crew. These were people who had been called monsters, savages, and worse by the very beings now begging for their help. Petty Officer Song Ji-woo, barely 19 years old, stared at the transmission. With wide eyes, Chief Engineer Won Hyun-sik, a grizzled veteran of the asteroid wars, just shook his head. Lieutenant Kim Tae-ho spoke first. His voice quiet but carrying clearly across the bridge. Captain, they're asking us to risk everything for people who've spent centuries calling us monsters. The Council banned human ships from their space. They said we were too violent, too dangerous. Remember the Proxima incident? Added Chief. 1. They nearly declared war on us because we used kinetic weapons to stop those space pirates. Said our methods were barbaric. Commander Park pulled up tactical displays on her personal screen. Sir, preliminary analysis suggests these void devourers are unlike anything we've encountered. They seem to feed on energy itself, conventional. Weapons, lasers, plasma, particle beams. They'd probably just make these things stronger. Lee studied the fear in Ambassador Yiltara's eyes. He'd seen that same look before, during the siege of New Seoul when the raiders came. Terror so pure, it stripped away everything else. Pride, prejudice, politics, just the desperate need to survive. Ambassador Lee said finally, You'll have our answer within 24 hours. Iron Fang out. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in darkness. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in an eerie red glow. "Sir," Park asked quietly. Lee was already moving toward his command chair. "Park, send an encrypted message to Terra Command. Priority Alpha. Tell them to activate the Planet Breaker protocols." Park's eyes widened. The Planet Breakers were humanity's most closely guarded secret ships designed for one purpose: to survive and fight in conditions that would instantly kill any other species in the galaxy. "All of them, sir. Every single one," Lee confirmed. "And contact the other Deathworld species. The Forge Masters, the Deep Swimmers, the Crystalborn. Tell them the galaxy is ending, and they need us to save it." Lieutenant Kim looked up from his sensors. "Captain, long-range scans confirm it. Those energy signatures are accelerating. At current speed, they'll reach the core worlds in 6 days." Lee stared out at the stars through the main viewport. Somewhere out there, ancient horrors were awakening, hungry for the destruction of everything that lived. And somehow, the monsters of the rim worlds had become the galaxy's last hope. "Then we better not keep them waiting," he said grimly. Bastion Prime Station had never seen anything like this. The massive neutral outpost, built in the empty space between galactic sectors, suddenly found itself hosting the most dangerous gathering in history. Ships arrived from every corner of the galaxy's deadliest worlds, their hulks scarred by radiation, heat, and pressure that would crush normal vessels in seconds. Admiral Choi Min-ho felt the artificial gravity shift as his flagship Worldender locked into the station's docking ring. The ship groaned around him, its hull still cooling from their jump through the Hellfire Nebula. Nothing else could have made the journey that fast, but human ships were built different. They were built to survive what would kill everything else. "The other delegations are already waiting," reported Captain Lee Do-min, his aide. "Some of them have been here for hours." Choi nodded, checking his uniform one last time. Today would decide if the galaxy lived or died. No pressure at all. The airlock hissed open, and Choi stepped onto Bastion Prime. The first thing that hit him was the smell: ozone, sulfur, and something that burned his nostrils. The second thing was the sight of his allies. The Shardborn representative stood nearly 3 meters tall, its crystalline body reflecting the station's lights like a living prism. When it moved, musical notes rang through the air. The humans had nicknamed this species the Crystal Giants, though they preferred their real name. This particular individual's name translated to Forged in Fire, which seemed fitting. "Admiral." Choi Forged in Fire's voice chimed like wind through glass. "Your reputation precedes you. The human who fought 3 pirate fleets alone and won." Next to the towering crystal being stood something completely different. The depth swimmer commander barely reached Choi's shoulder, but his compact frame was built like a tank. His people came from worlds where the ocean pressure could flatten mountains. His dark blue skin glistened under the lights, and when he breathed, Choi could hear the strange double rhythm of his adapted lungs. "Commander Deep Current," the depth swimmer introduced himself, his voice a low rumble that seemed to come from his chest. "Your arrival is timely, Admiral. We have much to discuss." Behind them, other representatives from the galaxy's most hostile worlds waited. The Forge Masters, beings of living metal who called volcanic worlds home. The Storm Riders, who flew through gas-giant atmospheres for fun. The Void Touched, who had learned to survive in the empty spaces between stars. All of them were outcasts. All of them were dangerous. And now, all of them might be the galaxy's only hope. Before we begin, Forged in Fire's crystalline features shifted in what might have been a frown. We must address the obvious question. Why should we bleed for those who exile us to the Rim? The Galactic Council has spent centuries calling us monsters. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled representatives. Commander Lee Yanru, standing behind Choi, tensed. She'd been at the Battle of Kepler Station when the Council had condemned human tactics as barbarically excessive. Never mind that those tactics had saved 3 million civilian lives. "I remembered the trade embargo," growled Ironbone, the Forge Master representative. His voice sounded like grinding metal. He said our methods were too crude for civilized space. Commander Og-1 stepped forward, her intelligence officer's uniform crisp, despite the journey. She'd been analyzing data for the past 3 days, and her findings were terrifying. "Because they're not stopping with the rim worlds," she said simply, activating her portable holographic projector. The conference room darkened as the display came to life. A 3-dimensional map of the galaxy appeared, showing the spiral arms. In brilliant detail, red markers indicated the Void Devourer's path of destruction. "Look at this trajectory," O continued, her voice steady despite the horror she was describing. "They started at the Zephyrian system, here. Then they consumed the Altarian colonies. The Centauri defense grid lasted exactly 14 minutes. The Lieutenant, Colonel Hun Mina, her uniform displaying the scars of a dozen battles, pointed to the projection with a mechanical arm, a souvenir from the asteroid wars. They're not random. They're following the spiral arm structure, consuming everything in a direct line toward the galactic core." The display zoomed in, showing detailed scans of the Void Devourers themselves. Dark, shifting masses that seemed to bend light around them. When the sensors tried to measure their exact size, the readings fluctuated wildly. "Every world, every species, every civilization in their path gone," Han said grimly. "Not destroyed, consumed, as if they never existed." Deep Current's double-bass voice filled the silence. "Our deep space monitoring stations have confirmed this trajectory. These entities don't just consume matter, they consume the very fabric of space-time itself. Our scientists calculate that if they reach the galactic core, the gravitational disruption will cause a cascade collapse." "Meaning?" asked Stormrider, Hudens as with lightning, her electrical field crackling with tension. "Meaning? The entire galaxy's structure fails," Deep Current replied. "Every star system, every planet, every living thing, crushed into a single point of infinite density." The room fell silent. Even these hardened warriors from the galaxy's deadliest worlds seemed shaken by the scope of the threat. Captain Nam, Sujin, representing the human special forces, had heard enough. She slammed her cybernetic fist on the metal table, leaving a dent in the reinforced surface. "Then we stop them here. With everything we have, Council's finest fleets couldn't even slow them down," Ironbone pointed out. "What makes you think we can succeed where they failed?" Commander O pulled up another display, this one showing comparative weapon analyses, because they fought conventionally. Energy weapons, plasma cannons, particle beams, Void Devourers seemed to absorb energy-based attacks. They're feeding on the very weapons used against them. But kinetic weapons, she continued, highlighting human battle reports, showed different results. Captain Li Wan's initial engagement with Iron Fang proved that solid projectiles moving at relativistic speeds can damage them. Lieutenant Park. Jamin, the youngest officer present, spoke up nervously. "Ma'am, are you suggesting we use the forbidden weapons?" "Forbidden weapons. Every species had them, the tools of war so terrible that galactic law banned their use. Planet breakers. The Shardborn had stellar manipulators. The depth swimmers could create artificial black holes." Admiral Choi looked around the room at the assembled representatives. Warriors from worlds that would kill most galactic citizens in minutes. Survivors who had faced the impossible and lived. "The Council wanted our help," he said finally. "They'll get it, but we do this our way." He stood, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had faced death among the stars and refused to blink. "Signal your fleets. Let's bring the ships we swore we'd never use again. Wake up the weapons we promised to keep sleeping." Forged in Fire's crystalline form rang with harmonic approval. "The Shardborn stellar cores will answer." The deep fleet rises, rumbled Deep Current, one by one, the other. Representatives added their voices. The Storm Riders, the Forge Masters. The Void touched, all agreeing to unleash their most terrible weapons against an enemy. It threatened everything. As the meeting broke up and the representatives returned to their ships, Admiral Choi remained. Behind with his human officers, Sir asked Commander O quietly, "Do you really think we can win?" Choi stared out the viewport at the assembled fleet ships from Hell itself, crewed by beings forged in the galaxy's most hostile crucibles. Commander, he said finally, when the universe spawns monsters that eat reality, you don't send diplomats. You send monsters of your own. The human fleet that gathered at coordinates Zeta 77 would have given the Galactic Council nightmares. These weren't the sleek, elegant vessels that cruised through civilized space. These were warships born in the fires of humanity's deadliest conflicts, forged to fight battles that would drive sane beings mad with terror. Captain Yun Hyan-woo stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Solar Hammer, watching his fellow captains arrive through the viewport. His ship was a monster, 2 kilometers of twisted metal and adaptive armor that could survive a direct dive through a star's corona. The hull still glowed faintly red from their journey through the Inferno sector, where temperatures reached millions of degrees. Captain, the Death's Edge is requesting final approach clearance, called out Navigation Officer Kim Woo-Jin. Yoon nodded, studying the approaching vessel. The Death's Edge looked like death itself, matte black hull that seemed to absorb light weapons ports that glowed with barely contained energy. Captain Bang In-ho commanded that ship, and rumor said he'd once fought off an entire pirate armada single-handedly. All ships, report status. Admiral Choi's voice crackled through the fleet communications channel. The sound was distorted by the exotic radiation fields surrounding their weapons, but his authority came through clearly. Solar Hammer operational, Yoon responded, checking his weapon systems. The main cannon could punch through a gas giant's core and keep going. The secondary batteries fired shells made from compressed matter that hit harder than asteroid impacts. Death's Edge ready for deployment, came Bang In-ho's gravelly voice. Singularity torpedoes armed and loaded. Shiver ran through Yoon's crew at those words. Singularity torpedoes. Weapons that created miniature black holes on impact. They'd been outlawed by every civilized species after the Titan incident, where one torpedo had accidentally consumed an entire moon. Lieutenant Commander An So-young's voice joined the channel from her stealth destroyer. Silent Reaper. Quantum. Disruption missiles online. Admiral. Though I have to say, these weapons are banned by every galactic treaty ever written. Yoon could hear the nervousness in her voice. Quantum disruption missiles didn't just destroy their targets, they erased them from existence at the subatomic level. The targets simply stopped being real. The Void Devourers don't follow treaties, Admiral Choi replied grimly. Neither do we. Not today. Through his sensors, Yoon watched the rest of the human fleet take formation. The assault cruiser Thunder God bristled with kinetic bombardment systems. The battleship Iron Will carried experimental gravity bombs that could collapse small moons. The heavy destroyer Final Strike was loaded with antimatter warheads that burned with the fury of dying stars. But the humans weren't alone. The Allied Deathworld fleets were equally terrifying in their own ways. The Shardborn vessels looked like living crystals drifting through space. Their flagship, the Heart of the Forge, was a kilometers-long diamond that could channel the raw energy of a star through its crystalline structure. When it fired, the beam could cut through planets like a hot knife through butter. Magnificent, whispered Science Officer Park Min-roo, studying the alien ship through their sensors. Their entire hull is one massive focusing crystal. They can absorb stellar radiation and convert it directly into weapon energy. The Depth Swimmer fleet was even stranger. Their ships seemed to ripple and flow like liquid metal, bending space-time around them as they moved. The largest vessel, the Pressure Deep, actually compressed space to travel faster than physics should allow. How do they do that? Asked Weapons Officer Lee Chung-min, staring at the readings. Their homeworld has gravity so intense it warps space-time, Park explained. They've learned to manipulate gravitational fields like we manipulate electricity. The Forge Master ships were the most brutal-looking of all. Massive, angular chunks of living metal that looked more like flying mountains than spacecraft. Iron Mountain was their flagship, a vessel that could ram straight through a planet and emerge from the other side intact. Instantly, Do-young at the communication station suddenly looked up, her face pale. Sir, incoming transmission from the Galactic Council. They're requesting we reconsider our weapon choices. Put them through, Yoon ordered. The familiar blue features of Ambassador Yultara appeared on the main screen, but now she looked horrified instead of desperate. Captain Yune, Admiral Choi. We're detecting weapons signatures that violate 17 different galactic conventions. Surely there are less destructive alternatives. Behind the ambassador, Yoon could see other council members gesturing frantically at displays showing the assembled fleet. One of them, a pale, thin being from the Centauri system, was pointing at sensor readings with 4 trembling arms. They are concerned about collateral damage, Dayoung translated quietly. Admiral Choi's voice cut across the channel, cold as vacuum. Tell them when you're fighting monsters that eat reality itself, you don't hold back. The transmission cut to static as weapons systems across the human fleet powered up to full capacity. The Solar Hammer S main cannon began its charging cycle, drawing power from 3 fusion reactors. Around them, other ships did the same. Captain? SCO Tahayan, aboard the missile cruiser Stormbringer, reported his status. Asteroid killer missiles loaded and targeted. Each one can crack a moon in half. Planet Buster bombs armed, added Captain 1 Jihoon from the heavy bomber Asterisk world. Breaker. Fair warning to all ships. When these go off, you want to be at least a light minute away. The Allied fleets were equally prepared. The Shardborn had begun channeling energy from the nearby star, their crystalline holes glowing brighter by the minute. The depth swimmers were creating gravitational distortions that made space itself ripple like water. The Forge Masters had activated their ramming drives, systems designed to punch through planetary cores. Admiral reported communications officer. Jung Haijin, we're receiving final position reports from all Allied fleets. Everyone's in position. Through the viewport, Yoon could see the massive formation they'd created. 200 ships from the galaxy's most dangerous worlds carrying weapons that civilized space had banned for good reason. They looked like an invasion fleet from humanity's darkest nightmares. Long-range sensors detecting the Void Devourers called out sensor operator Kong Subin, distance closing. Estimated contact in 6 hours. Admiral Choi's final transmission. Reached every ship in the fleet. It's all vessels. This is Admiral Choi. In 6 hours, we face an enemy that has consumed entire star systems. They've destroyed everything the Council could throw at them. They haven't faced us. His voice grew harder, carrying the weight of humanity's long struggle to survive among the stars. We are the children of Deathworlds, forged in hell itself. And today, we show the galaxy what monsters look like when they fight for something worth saving. The fleet began its final approach, weapons charged and ready. Behind them, the civilized galaxy waited in terror. Ahead, ancient horrors moved through space. Hungry for destruction, the greatest battle in galactic history was about to begin. Captain Suminki thought he'd seen everything in his 20 years commanding scout ships. He'd flown through solar storms, navigated asteroid fields that would crush normal pilots, and survived 3 separate pirate attacks. But nothing had prepared him for what waited near the Terminus Nebula. Quick strike to Fleet Command, he transmitted, his voice tight. With disbelief, I have visual contact with the targets, but these things, they're not what we expected. The Terminus Nebula had been a landmark for centuries. A massive cloud of gas and stellar dust that glowed with the light of newborn stars. Traders used it for navigation. Scientists studied its unique properties. It had been there for 10,000 years. Now it was gone. Contact. SEO's voice cracked over the communications channel. These things they're not ships. They're living void, maybe 3 kilometers across each. They just... They ate the nebula. All of it. Through his view screen, SEO watched something that defied explanation. Dark shapes moved through space where the nebula used to be, their forms, shifting and flowing like living shadows. When his sensors tried to scan them, the readings went crazy. Sometimes they showed massive solid objects. Sometimes they showed nothing at all. Quick strike, fall back immediately, came Admiral Choi's urgent voice. Do not engage. Repeat. Do not engage. But it was too late. One of the Void Devourers had noticed the small scout ship. It moved toward SEO's vessel, not flying, but flowing through space like liquid darkness. As it approached, SEO felt something impossible. His ship's hull was aging. Paint peeled away, metal corroded, and his instruments started failing one by one. "Emergency jump," Sio shouted to his crew. The quick strike vanished in a flash of blue light just as dark tendrils reached for it. The main battle erupted 20 minutes later as the Deathworld fleets converged on the enemy. Admiral Choi watched from the bridge of the World Ender as 200 of the galaxy's most dangerous ships faced off against beings that shouldn't exist. "All ships, weapons free," he commanded. "Let's see what these things are made of." Commander Kong Vajin, aboard the assault cruiser Thunderbolt, fired the first shots. Her ship's main guns launched kinetic rounds, chunks of compressed metal, moving at 90% light speed. The projectiles crossed the distance in seconds and slammed into the lead Void Devourer. Direct hit. Her weapons officer shouted, "Target is..." Wait, it's staggering. For the first time since the enemy had appeared, something had actually hurt them. The Void Devourer writhed in space, its dark form rippling like disturbed water. Parts of its body seemed to flicker between existing and not existing. "Targets. Wounded," Kong reported, excitement in her voice. "Conventional energy weapons are useless, but our kinetic bombardment is working." The discovery spread through the fleet like wildfire. Captain Rujahan's ship Iron Storm unleashed a barrage of collapsed matter shells, projectiles so dense they warped space around them. When they hit, pieces of the Void Devourers were torn away, dissolving into nothingness. But the enemy wasn't helpless. The Void Devourers fought back with weapons that made no sense. Tendrils of pure entropy reached out from their bodies, and whatever they touched aged millions of years in seconds. The human cruiser Valiant, commanded by Captain Moon Jung-soo, got too close to one of these attacks. "Hull breach on decks 7 through 12, shouted Moon's damage control officer. "No, wait. The hull isn't breached. It's just... gone. Turned to cosmic dust." The forward sections of the Valiant had been aged so rapidly that the metal had crumbled to powder. Moon watched in horror as his crew compartments simply ceased to exist, taking 50 good people with them. "Valiant is withdrawing," Moon transmitted, his voice hollow. "We've lost forward weapons and life support. Half my crew is just... gone." The battle spread across multiple star systems as both sides maneuvered for advantage. Shardborn. Ships executed a maneuver that defied belief. They dove directly into the system's star, their crystalline hulls absorbing the stellar energy. When they emerged, they were glowing like miniature suns, firing concentrated stellar plasma that burned through space itself. The Forge Master ships used different tactics. Ramming straight into the Void Devourers with their reinforced hulls, the impact should have destroyed both vessels, but the living metal of the Forge Master ships actually seemed to hurt the creatures on contact. Colonel Im Hai-jin, coordinating the battle from the command vessel's strategic mind, watched the tactical displays with growing concern. "We're losing ships faster than we can count," she reported to Admiral Choi. "But we're hurting them. Whatever these things are, they can be killed." The turning point came when the depth swimmers executed their ultimate gambit, their flagship. The pressured deep began compressing local spacetime around itself. The gravitational distortion grew stronger and stronger until reality itself started to bend. "All ships, emergency withdrawal from Grid 77, transmitted deep current. We're creating a controlled gravitational anomaly."
Appled.
Next was beautiful and terrifying. Space folded in on itself, creating a gravitational distortion so powerful it tore 3 Void Devourers apart at the quantum level. The creatures simply came apart. Their exotic matter scattered across light years of space, but victory came with a price. The gravitational weapon destroyed the depth swimmer flagship as well. Deep Current and his entire crew were crushed into a single point of infinite density. Their sacrifice buying precious time for the rest of the fleet, Captain Shin. Wu Jin had watched the battle from his small attack vessel, Final Thunder. His ship was one of humanity's most classified weapons, a kamikaze vessel with a singularity core designed for one purpose: to take out targets too dangerous for conventional attack. "Admiral," he transmitted, his voice calm despite what he was about to do, reading massive energy buildup in the largest Void Devourer. It's preparing some kind of superweapon. Through his sensors, Shin could see the creature changing. growing brighter as it channeled power from somewhere beyond normal space. If it completed whatever it was doing, the entire human fleet would be destroyed. Final Thunder requesting permission to engage, Shin said quietly. Admiral Choi understood immediately. Permission granted, Captain. It's been an honor. Shin's ship accelerated toward the massive Void Devourer, dodging tendrils of entropy that tried to age his vessel into dust. His crew, all volunteers who knew this was a one-way mission, worked frantically to keep the ship intact long enough to reach their target. For humanity, Shin transmitted as his ship dove into the creature's center mass. For the galaxy, 8. The Singularity Core detonated inside the Void Devourer, creating a miniature black hole that consumed the creature from within. The explosion lit up space for millions of kilometers. It's visible even from the distant council worlds. When the light faded, the largest Void Devourer was gone. But so was Captain Shin and his brave crew. The battle raged for 6 more hours, spreading across 3 star systems. Ships from both sides were destroyed, but slowly, impossibly, the Deathworld forces began to win. The Void Devourers, ancient and terrible as they were, had never faced opponents crazy enough to dive into stars, compress space-time, or detonate singularities in their faces. As the last enemy creature fell to a combined bombardment from human kinetic weapons and shard-borne stellar fire, silence fell over the battlefield. The greatest threat the galaxy had ever known was finally dead, but the cost had been enormous. Of the 200 ships that had entered the battle, only 67 remained operational. Thousands of the galaxy's bravest warriors had given their lives to save civilization itself. Admiral Choi stared at the tactical display, watching debris drift past his viewport. They had won, but victory felt hollow. When purchased with so much blood, the silence after the battle felt like death itself. Admiral Choi Minho stood on the bridge of the World Ender, his flagship barely holding together after 6 hours of hell. Through the cracked viewports, he watched pieces of destroyed ships drift past like metallic snow. Some of those fragments had been his friends just hours ago. The bridge looked like a war zone. Sparks flew from damaged consoles. Emergency. Lighting cast everything in blood-red shadows, and the air tasted of smoke and ozone. Half his crew was gone, taken by entropy weapons, or lost when the ship's hull was aged to dust in several sections. Commander Park Soo-jin limped toward him, her uniform torn and bloodied, her left arm in a makeshift sling. Across the bridge when a Void Devourer's attack had aged their portside armor into powder. But she was alive, and right now, that made her one of the lucky ones. Admiral, she said quietly, handing him a data pad. Final casualty reports from all surviving ships. Choi took the pad with hands that trembled slightly. The numbers made his stomach turn. 60% losses, he read aloud, his voice hollow. Of 200 ships that entered the battle, only 67 are still operational. Park nodded grimly. The Shardborn lost their entire stellar fleet, sir. All 12 crystal ships, including the Heart of the Forge, Forged in Fire died when his ship dove into that star to supercharge their weapons. They never came back out. Choi closed his eyes, remembering the crystalline being who had questioned humanity's motives just days ago. In the end, Forged in Fire had proven that courage wasn't limited to any one species. The depth swimmers, he asked, though he already knew the answer. Their homeworld fleet is gone, Park replied softly. Deep Current's sacrifice with the gravitational weapon took out 3 Void Devourers, but it cost them everything. The asterisk pressure, Deep Asterisk, and her entire escort squadron, 23 ships, over 15,000 crew members. The communications console crackled to life, interrupting the grim accounting. Admiral, incoming transmission from the Galactic Council, reported Ensign Won Hai-soo, one of the few junior officers who'd survived the battle. Put them through, Choi ordered, straightening his torn uniform. The main screen flickered, then resolved into the familiar blue features of Ambassador Yultera. But she looked different now, older, more fragile. Tears streamed down her alien features as she stared at the human admiral who had saved her civilization.
Admiral Choi,
She began, her melodic voice breaking with emotion. The Galactic Council has convened an emergency session. We, We formally apologize for centuries of prejudice against your peoples. The Deathworld species, humanity most of all, have proven today that we were wrong about everything. Behind the ambassador, Choi could see other council members, beings from dozens of advanced civilizations, all looking humbled and ashamed. These were the same aliens who had called humans barbaric and uncivilized for using kinetic weapons. Now they owed their existence to those same weapons. We offer full membership in the Galactic Council, Yultara continued. Voting rights, trade agreements, access to all our technologies, and our eternal gratitude. How can we ever repay this debt? Before Choi could answer, Captain OG-1 stepped forward beside him. She'd been promoted to Admiral just an hour ago, after her superior died when the strategic command was torn apart by entropy weapons. The promotion ceremony had lasted 30 seconds. There hadn't been time for anything longer. With respect, Ambassador, O said calmly, we don't want your council seats. The alien looked genuinely confused, her large dark eyes blinking rapidly. Then, what do you want? Resources, territory. Name it, and it's yours. Admiral Choi stepped closer to the screen, his weathered face showing every year of fighting. In the galaxy's deadliest regions, we want you to remember, he said simply. Remember? Yultara asked. Remember this day, Choi continued, his voice growing stronger. When the universe gets dark, when the impossible threatens everything, you hold dear. Remember who answered your call. Remember who bled so that civilization could survive. Lieutenant Kim Tae-ho, one of the few surviving bridge crew members, moved to stand beside his admiral. The young officer's face was streaked with soot and tears, but his voice was steady. And maybe next time. Don't wait until the galaxy's ending to ask for our help. The ambassador's tears flowed harder. We will remember. The council is already drafting new policies. No more exile zones. No more restrictions on Deathworld species. You've earned your place among the stars. We already had our place, Choi replied quietly. We just had to remind you of it. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence again. Through the viewports, the debris field stretched for millions of kilometers, the remains of the greatest battle in galactic history. Communications. Officer Jung Min-jun looked up from his console. Sir, we're receiving messages from all over the galaxy. The Altarian colonies want to build a memorial. The Centauri Defense Force is requesting permission to name their new flagship after Captain Shin Woo-jin. Even the Zephyrian survivors are asking to send delegations to our homeworlds. Admiral O smiled sadly. Tell them we're honored, but we're not heroes. We're just people who did what needed doing. With respect, ma'am, said Chief Engineer Lim Dong-hwan, emerging from a damaged access panel. Speak for yourself. What we did today, this will be remembered for 1,000 years. The surviving ships began their long journey home. The human vessels led the way, their hulls scarred by entropy weapons and stellar radiation. Behind them followed the remnants of the other Deathworld fleets, crystalline fragments of shard-borne ships, the twisted metal survivors of the Forge Master Fleet, and the few remaining void-touched vessels that flickered in and out of normal space. They left behind a galaxy that would never be the same. The Void Devourers were gone, but so was the old order. The Council species had learned that their advanced technology and refined civilization meant nothing against true evil. Sometimes it took monsters to fight monsters. As the World Ender jumped to hyperspace, Admiral Choi stood alone on the observation deck, looking back at the battlefield one last time. 67 ships going home. 133 ships that never would. Was it worth it? Asked Admiral O, joining him at the VIEWPORT. Choi thought about Captain Shin Woo-jin's final transmission. For humanity, for the galaxy. He thought about Deep Current's sacrifice and Forged in Fire's last stellar dive, and the thousands of other warriors who had given everything to stop the darkness. Ask me in 100 years, he said finally. When the Council's children are playing safely on worlds that should have been consumed, and when scientists are studying stars that should have been eaten, when life goes on because we were willing to die for it. The ships disappeared into hyperspace, carrying their survivors back to worlds of crushing gravity, lethal radiation, and impossible storms. Back to the places that had forged them into weapons capable of fighting the impossible. Behind them, the galaxy began to heal. New trade routes opened through Deathworld space. Scientists from advanced civilizations started studying the harsh worlds that had produced such incredible warriors. Children on 1,000 worlds learned new stories about heroes who came from hell itself. And somewhere in the deep archives of the Galactic Council, Ambassador Yultar recorded a simple message for future generations when darkness threatened. To consume everything, the galaxy's monsters became its salvation. May we never forget their sacrifice, and may we never again wait so long to ask for their help. The Deathworld fleets had returned to their hostile homes. But they had left something behind, proof that the galaxy's greatest strength lay not in its most advanced civilizations, but in its most dangerous ones, when hell itself threatened. The stars it had taken those forged in hell to drive it back, the END.